The airport atrium café was too warm for winter. Golden lights glowed above polished marble floors, and somewhere nearby a violin cover of Hallelujah played softly over the speakers, half lost in the drone of rolling suitcases and boarding calls. Now, boarding flight 208 to Seattle. Gate B32. Emily Ross stared at the empty chair across from her. 6:47 p.m. 17 minutes late. Her phone screen lit up again. One message. Running late. Sorry. No punctuation. No explanation. Emily's thumb hovered over the screen, debating between a polite response and radio silence. She chose neither. She locked the phone and set it down beside her untouched cup of chamomile tea. 5 years. That's how long it had been since she'd tried this a blind date. Her best friend had insisted it was time. "You used to believe in new beginnings," she'd said, sliding the man's photo across the table like it was a dare. Now, Emily wasn't sure if she believed in beginnings at all. She looked down at her coat pocket, the one she still stitched closed out of habit. The fabric hadn't held a stethoscope in over half a decade, but some things didn't unlearn themselves. Like how the sound of a child coughing could make her heart race, or how the word pediatrician still caught in her throat when she filled out forms. Owen's name hadn't been said aloud in years, but it still hung around her like airport fog, present even when invisible. A sudden clang snapped her out of the thought. Someone had dropped a metal tray near the barista station. The noise collided with a blaring overhead announcement and the screech of a cleaning cart's wheel. And in the midst of that chaos, a small figure stumbled toward her table. A boy, maybe 7 years old, wearing a slightly oversized red puffer jacket, a backpack that bounced with each hurried step, and cheeks flushed from either the cold or determination. Without saying a word, he reached up and set a piece of folded paper in front of her. It was creased neatly like it had been folded and unfolded many times. Written in blue crayon were the words, "He's sorry he's late. Please don't leave yet." Emily blinked. "I what?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he stood there trembling slightly, his eyes darting to the noisy intercom again as a jet engine rumbled in the distance. His hands fidgeted near the zipper of his coat. Mini-crisis, her mind diagnosed. Overstimulated, flight response triggering. Classic pediatric pattern. She leaned forward, her voice calm. "Hey, you're okay. Can you take a breath with me?" He looked at her wide-eyed. 4 in... Ready. She inhaled, slowly holding up 4 fingers, and out. He mirrored her, shaky at first. "Good. Now let's do 5 under 4 to 3, 2, 1. See if we can find 5 things we can see." She pointed gently. "I see the coffee machine, the red chair, your cool backpack." He sniffled. "And your scarf. It has stars." "Exactly. That's 4. "One more." He looked down at his hands. "My fingers." She smiled. "Perfect." The boy exhaled slower this time. His shoulders dropped a little and the tight line in his brow began to soften. "You're kind," he whispered. Emily's heart twisted. "So are you." She looked down again at the note. "He's sorry he's late. Please don't leave yet." There was no signature, no clue who he was. But the boy's presence, his urgency, had bought more time than any apology ever could. "Would you like to sit?" she asked. He nodded, hopping onto the chair across from her like it wasn't meant for someone else. "Is that your drawing notebook?" she asked, noticing the sketch pad peeking from his backpack. "Yup," he said proudly. "I draw planes. My dad builds them." "Oh, really?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "That's a cool job." He nodded, scooting his jacket aside. Embroidered on his navy blue hoodie just beneath a chocolate smear was a small patch, Aero Nova Engineering Team. Emily's curiosity flared. She glanced past him through the glass atrium walls. In the far distance beyond, layers of gates and security lines was a long maintenance bay, the kind of place where engines hummed and jackets bore badges. "Do you come to the airport a lot?" she asked. "Only when Dad has important stuff." Tonight he ironed his shirt. He never irons. And he smiled a little. Emily tilted her head. "That must mean it's really important." The boy shrugged. "I think he's nervous. About work. About meeting someone." Emily blinked. Oh. She looked at the note again. He smiled a little shyly. He told me to give it to you if he didn't make it in time. She considered this. A part of her wanted to laugh, not unkindly, but at the absurdity of it all. Another blind date, another twist. But then she looked at the boy at the way he'd settled into the space like it wasn't just hers anymore. Like maybe this wasn't an interruption, but a bridge. Well, she said, checking the time. How about I stay? For 5 more minutes? The boy beamed. A plane thundered overhead. Emily flinched, but the boy didn't. He just stared up toward the sound like it meant something more than noise. Do you like flying? She asked. He hesitated. I'm not sure. They sat in silence for a moment. The cafe buzzed softly around them, oblivious. Travelers bustled by, some with purpose, some with exhaustion. The chair beside Emily remained empty, but it no longer felt lonely. Instead, it felt like waiting. She looked across the table at the boy at the badge on his hoodie, the sketches he now pulled out of his bag, the quiet resilience in his little frame. Then she looked at the empty chair again. Sometimes what we need arrives late, she thought. And sometimes it arrives in the form of a folded note and a boy who reminds you how to breathe again. The boy had moved to the window. Jamie pressed his nose to the cold glass-pane sketchbook balanced on one knee, crayon clutched tight in one hand. Outside, the airside lights blinked in rhythmic succession, green, red, amber tracing the outlines of taxiways and maintenance bays far beyond the terminal's secured walls. Emily Ross watched him from the table, her chamomile now lukewarm. She hadn't planned on staying, but something about the boy, the urgency in his small voice, the weight he seemed to carry like an oversized backpack had disarmed her completely. She stood and walked over, careful not to startle him. Whatcha drawing? Jamie turned the sketch pad, slightly letting her see. It was a plane, not a perfect one, but clearly a plane. A small jet with a broken wing drawn in jagged crayon strokes. A strip of Scotch tape ran across the break holding it together. I didn't have glue, he said matter-of-factly. But tape works. Emily crouched beside him, her brows lifting. Looks like it does. You fixed it. He nodded. Wings can be fixed. They don't always have to be thrown away. Her chest tightened. She wasn't sure if he was talking about the plane or people. You like planes. My dad builds them, he said proudly. He doesn't fly them, though. Not anymore. Emily tilted her head. Why not? Jamie shrugged, then paused as if choosing his words carefully. He says the sky doesn't feel the same since Mom left. Emily's breath caught. Jamie didn't elaborate. Instead, he flipped to a new page and began outlining another aircraft, this one sleeker with longer wings. Does he work over there? She asked, pointing toward a line of distant hangars and structures beyond the gates. Yeah, past the security and badge place, he said. But I'm not allowed in there. He says it's all safety stuff and grown-up tools. Lots of people with jackets and goggles. Emily chuckled softly. Sounds like a serious place. It is. But tonight he said something big was happening. He even ironed his shirt. Jamie glanced up, grinning. He never irons. That is serious, Emily agreed, sitting on the bench beside him. Jamie's expression grew thoughtful. He looked in the mirror and smiled a little. That's how I knew it was important. Maybe he was excited. Or nervous. Emily nodded slowly. She thought about her own mirror, how many times she'd stared into it these past years, and wondered if the woman looking back would ever smile without effort. Loss had a way of hollowing the simple things coffee in the morning books by the bedside reflections in glass. He builds planes, but he doesn't fly anymore. She glanced down at Jamie's sketchbook. The taped wing stood out like a scar that had chosen healing over hiding. A sudden chime rang through the atrium. Another announcement echoed overhead. Attention passengers and staff. Maintenance delay near Concourse D due to equipment malfunction. Please expect delays in the D area. Jamie froze. His crayon slipped from his hand, rolling to the floor. Emily noticed the way his small shoulders tensed, how his breath shortened. Not a full panic, but something close, a quiet rigidity like a child bracing for a sound he didn't want to hear. She gently touched his arm. "Hey, it's just a delay. Nothing bad." He didn't answer. "Is that where your dad is?" she asked softly. He gave a small nod. "Are you worried?" Another nod, quicker this time. Emily leaned down, meeting him at eye level. "Look at me." Jamie hesitated, then did. "You know what I do when I'm worried?" He blinked. "I picture a box, just a small one in my hands, and I pretend I can put all the scary thoughts in there, one by one." Jamie's eyes focused, curious, and when I'm done I close the box, real tight, and I say, "I'll open you later if I have to, but not now." Then I breathe. Jamie said nothing for a moment, then whispered, "Can you help me do that?" Emily smiled. "Of course." They closed their eyes together, invisible box cradled between them, packing away thoughts neither of them could quite name. The boy exhaled and his body relaxed just a little. When they opened their eyes again, the world outside looked the same. Blinking lights swirling snow in the distance, but inside it had softened. "Thank you," he whispered. "You're welcome." They sat in silence for a few moments more before Jamie spoke again. He really wanted to be here sooner. He said he didn't want to mess this up. Emily blinked. "This." Jamie gave a little smile. "Meeting you." She looked down at the folded note still in her coat pocket. 17 minutes late. And yet. She reached for her phone, finally opening the contact her friend had sent weeks ago, Thomas Hale. His number hovered on the screen, still unmessaged. With a small breath, she typed, "It's okay. Take your time." She hesitated, then hit send. No bubbles, no response. That was fine. She glanced over at Jamie, now sketching again, this time a plane with 2 wings that stretched wide and unbroken. He added clouds, then a sun in the corner. The colors were bold, optimistic. "Do you think he'll come soon?" the boy asked, not looking up. Emily considered the question, then nodded. "I think he's already trying." Jamie smiled, and this time Emily didn't look at the clock. She didn't need to. She was willing to wait, not forever, but just long enough for it to feel right. Sometimes a wing wasn't broken. It was just waiting for someone to care enough to mend it. The atrium buzzed with motion, a living organism of rolling suitcases, boarding calls, and muffled goodbyes. Beneath the soft yellow lighting, travelers swirled like snowflakes, each one headed somewhere, each one leaving something behind. Emily Ross sat at the cafe table again, watching the ebb and flow. Her tea had gone cold twice now. She hadn't ordered another. Jamie sat beside her, his sketchbook open but momentarily forgotten. He leaned toward the window that stretched floor-to-ceiling eyes, scanning the expanse of tarmac and blinking lights far beyond the glass. From this distance, Concourse D looked like a glowing mirage, buildings and service vehicles in constant choreography lit by runway lamps and the electric pulse of emergency beacons. Above them, flat screens displayed updated notices. Maintenance delay near Concourse D, ground crew on site. Please check with gate agents for updates. Emily watched as the message refreshed again in red. No one around them seemed to notice. Most passengers had places to be, flights to catch. The D area maintenance notice was just another travel hiccup in a sea of delays. But for Jamie, it was everything. His fingers gripped the edge of the table as he stared out at the distance. Though he didn't say it, Emily recognized the shift in his posture, the stiffness in his jaw, the way his foot tapped the floor, not in boredom, but restraint. She leaned over gently. "Hey, want to play a game while we wait?" He turned toward her, not quite smiling. "We count the runway lights," she said. "Pick a color. I'll count with you." Jamie hesitated, then glanced back at the window. "Red," he said. "Okay, you count red. I'll take white. Loser buys hot cocoa." He grinned faintly. "Deal." They watched in silence for a while. One red blinked near the edge of a hangar, 2 more closer to the taxiway. Emily spotted 3 white strobes near the service road. 6, she said. 8, Jamie replied. He turned triumphant. "You owe me cocoa." Emily raised her hands in mock surrender. "I'll gladly pay up." But the moment of levity faded when another loud engine roared outside, a cargo jet revving up for pushback. The sound echoed off the walls and buzzed in her chest like a low drumbeat. Jamie flinched. He turned toward her, his voice quieter than before. "I don't like the takeoff sound." Emily's smile faltered. "Too loud." He shook his head. "Too sudden." Then after a pause, "It makes me think of her." Emily sat back slightly. "Your mom?" He nodded, eyes on the window. "She was on a test flight once, a long time ago. She never came back." The words landed soft but solid, like snow with weight. Emily didn't rush to fill the silence. She just let it exist. "I used to love planes," Jamie said, tracing a line across the glass. "But now, when they leave the ground, I feel like they're never coming back." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, wanted to say something wise or soothing or simple, but instead she just said, "That makes sense." He looked at her, surprised maybe that she didn't correct him, didn't tell him not to feel what he was feeling. "I used to be a doctor," she added, staring out the window. "A long time ago." Jamie tilted his head. "Why'd you stop?" Emily exhaled. The truth sat in her chest like a weight she hadn't lifted in years. "There was a little boy named Owen," she said. "He was very sick. I thought I could save him." She paused. The sounds around her blurred announcements, footsteps, laughter from a nearby gate. But inside, she was still in that room, still hearing beeping monitors, still holding her breath. "I left the hospital after that," she said. "I told people I needed time. But really, I didn't believe in what I was doing anymore." Jamie looked down at his shoes. "I think my dad stopped believing in the sky," he said. "Like you stopped believing in hospitals." Emily's eyes stung. Just then, her phone vibrated. She grabbed it instinctively, thumb unlocking the screen. Thomas Hale. "Sorry for the delay. Safety briefing ran long. Finalizing sign-off docs now. I'll come find you pre-security as soon as I'm cleared." A second message followed. "Thank you for waiting." Emily read it twice. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond. Jamie peeked at the screen. "Is that him?" She nodded. He didn't say anything, but she could see something like relief flicker across his face, as if the message had stabilized something unspoken inside him. She typed back, "We're still here. Take your time. Send." Then she looked up at the chair across from her. Still empty. Still waiting. Still possible. "What do you think he'll say when he gets here?" Jamie asked. Emily smiled faintly. "Hopefully, hi. Maybe something about cocoa." Jamie nodded. "I think he'll smile. I hope so." Emily looked back out the window. The glow of Concourse D shimmered behind thin layers of frost and reflection. She imagined a man, tired maybe, or flustered, removing his safety goggles, clocking out brushing metal filings from his sleeves. 30 to 40 minutes, he'd said. She could wait. In this in-between space, this moment suspended between arrival and departure, something gentle had started to grow. No promises, no guarantees, just two people and a boy orbiting toward one another like stars trying again to form a constellation. The clatter of a janitor's mop bucket, the hiss of a milk steamer behind the cafe counter, a muffled boarding call from the speakers above, and then a voice, low, breathless, laced with apology. Emily. She turned. There he was. Thomas Hale stood just past the security demarcation line, 1 foot over, into pre-security the other, seemingly unsure whether it had permission to stay. His dark blue jacket bore a faded Aeronova patch near the collar smudged with streaks of oil and fine metal dust. A name tag hung askew from his lanyard. Safety goggles dangled from one hand. He looked like someone who had rushed, who had tried his best, who had run here not because he was afraid of being late, but because he knew what waiting could cost. Jamie spotted him first. Daddy. The boy launched forward without hesitation, backpack bouncing behind him. Thomas dropped to one knee just in time to catch him, the two of them folding into a hug that somehow folded time too, father and son in a quiet reunion that seemed to silence the terminal. Emily watched her heart rising into her throat. Then Thomas stood at Jamie's hand still clutched in his and stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I had to finish safety documentation hazard clearance on a new pressure valve. There was a team from Boston shadowing today, and—" "It's okay," Emily interrupted softly. "We stayed." Thomas let out a breath like it had been trapped in his chest for years. He looked at her, really looked, and his features softened. The stress lines around his eyes eased just enough to make room for something else. Something quieter. "Thank you," he said. Jamie, still clutching his dad's hand, tugged at his sleeve. "Can we get cocoa now?" Thomas smiled. "Absolutely. I think that's the least I can do." They took a table near the window a few steps away from where Emily had first sat alone hours earlier. The air felt different now. Not warmer, not quieter, but filled with something steadier. As if the airport itself had exhaled with them. Thomas returned from the cafe counter balancing 2 cups of coffee and 1 paper cup topped with whipped cream and chocolate drizzle. "Deluxe for the Champion Light counter," he said, handing Jamie his cocoa. Jamie beamed, then slid into the booth with the casual entitlement only children possess when they're deeply loved and slightly overtired. Thomas took the seat across from Emily. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was earned, full of things neither of them needed to rush into. He was the first to break it. "Jamie told you about her, didn't he?" Emily nodded. Just a little. Enough. Thomas's gaze fell to the table fingers tracing the rim of his paper cup. It was a test flight. She was part of the engineering verification team. Mechanical systems. The plane was fine, technically, but the pilot hit a pocket of unstable air, came down hard outside Flagstaff. He didn't look up as he spoke, but his voice didn't shake either. It was the kind of calm that only came after enough time had passed to soften the edges but not erase the center. "I stepped away after that," he said. "Took a leave. Thought I'd never go back. But—" Jamie kept drawing planes, kept asking questions. "I figured if I couldn't fly, maybe I could at least help someone else get it right." Emily swallowed her fingers, tightening around her own cup. "I used to be a pediatrician," she said, her voice barely above the hum of the terminal. Thomas looked up. "I left after a case I couldn't fix. Owen. 4 years old. Complications hit out of nowhere and—" She exhaled. "I didn't leave medicine. I left my faith in it." They sat in that truth together. A man who once trusted the sky. A woman who once trusted healing. Both left suspended somewhere between belief and grief. Jamie, oblivious to the weight at the table, had begun quietly humming and doodling in his sketchbook beside them, the whipped cream forming a mustache across his upper lip. Emily smiled at him, then glanced back at Thomas. "He's a good kid," she said. Thomas followed her gaze. "He's the best part of me." There was a pause. Then Thomas asked almost cautiously, "Do you ever think about going back?" Emily shook her head. "Not until recently." His brow rose slightly curious. She hesitated, then added, "Today felt different. I didn't expect to find anything here. And instead you found a boy with a note and a sketchbook. And his dad, eventually." Thomas chuckled softly. "Fashionably late." Emily tilted her head. "Punctuality is overrated. Showing up, that's the hard part." He looked at her, and this time she saw it the thing Jamie must have glimpsed in the mirror. A flicker of something returning. A readiness to see. To connect. Jamie had slumped lower in the booth, blinking slow and sleepy. Without a word, Emily stood, stepped around the table, and gently draped her coat over him. Thomas watched her move. Watched her tuck a corner of the coat near Jamie's neck and run a hand through his hair with such tenderness it almost undid him. "He's safe with you," he said quietly. Emily looked back at him, her voice gentle. He's safe because of you. Outside, snow had started to dance across the window. Not yet heavy, but insistent, like a warning without panic. Then came the chime. Weather alert: blizzard conditions approaching the Denver metro area. Passengers are advised to remain indoors. All outbound ground transportation may be impacted. Thomas exhaled slowly, glancing toward the atrium's glass dome. Lights above shimmered, catching flakes mid-fall. Well, he said, voice wry. Looks like the storm found us after all. Emily didn't answer right away. She just sat back down, eyes drifting toward the chair across from her. This time, it wasn't empty. The storm didn't roar, in it crept. By the time the fourth weather alert chimed through the airport speakers, the snow had begun to swirl like powdered sugar in a glass dome. The temperature dropped sharply, and visibility outside the atrium windows faded to a gauzy gray. Then came the official notice. Due to blizzard conditions, all highway exits from Denver International Airport are temporarily closed. Passengers are advised to remain indoors until further notice. Emily looked up from her cup. Around them, people shifted. Tension flickered across faces. Phones lit up. Texts buzzed. Some passengers groaned. Others snapped shut their suitcases with the weary rhythm of seasoned travelers. Jamie, still curled beneath her coat, stirred. Thomas stood slowly, his brows tightening as he scanned the alert flashing across the monitors. Highways are gridlocked, he muttered. Taxis, shuttles. Nothing's getting through. Everything's either backed up or redirected. Emily glanced at him. So, we're stuck. Temporarily, he said. Then, after a pause, but not helpless, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his Aeronova badge, clipped it securely to his collar. I've got access to the emergency housing corridor, he explained. It connects to the airport Marriott through the sky bridge. It's where employees and vendors crash when weather locks things down. Emily blinked. That's allowed? Thomas gave a small smile. Let's just say, it's strongly encouraged during blizzards. And it's public side. You wouldn't be breaking any security rules. She hesitated just long enough to hear another gust of wind batter the glass like an impatient knock. Okay, she said. Lead the way. The walk to the sky bridge felt like moving through a paused film. The airport was still alive, but slower, like it had surrendered to the inevitability of stillness. They crossed the glass-covered passageway, snow brushing in soft, silent spirals against the overhead structure. Jamie walked between them, his hand slipping naturally into Emily's. She didn't notice until Thomas did. The Marriott lobby was a warm contrast to the terminal, dimly lit with golden lamps and lined with leather chairs. A small kiosk glowed in the corner, vending hot drinks and emergency toiletries. Thomas headed toward it, tapping selections on the screen. I've got this, he said. House account. Jamie wandered toward a plush seat, his sketchbook already half open. Emily followed, easing beside him, pulling a piece of napkin from her coat pocket. Want to see something cool? She asked. He looked up. She began folding. Her hands moved with quiet precision, each crease sharp, each corner crisp. Within a minute, a paper airplane took shape in her fingers, its wings tucked with delicate care. Origami, she explained. I used to make these for patients waiting for test results. It didn't fix anything, but sometimes it gave them something to hold. Jamie took the plane gently. Can I draw on it? Absolutely. As he grabbed a marker, Thomas returned with 3 cups, 2 with coffee sleeves, 1 overflowing with whipped cream. I upgraded you, he told Jamie. Extra sprinkles. Jamie gave a sleepy grin. That's the best kind. They sat together in a small seating alcove tucked beside a fake fireplace. Jamie, warmed and calmed, drew stars on the wings of his origami plane. Emily watched as his eyelids began to droop again. He doesn't usually sleep well, Thomas said quietly. Not since the accident. Something about the silence. It makes him listen too hard. Emily understood. I used to leave a white noise machine running in the hospital, she said. Sometimes peace is too loud if you're not ready for it. Jamie blinked up at them. Will someone read? Emily looked at Thomas. He hesitated. I'm not very good at— I've got it, Emily said softly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim children's book, one she'd bought earlier that week without knowing why. It was about a fox and a balloon. Simple, gentle, safe. Jamie leaned against her arm as she opened the pages and began to read. Her voice was soft, even made for listening. Thomas sat opposite them, elbows on his knees, eyes not on the story but on the picture of it, the scene they made together. The way Jamie's head dipped onto her shoulder, the way Emily turned each page with unhurried care, the way it looked like something he'd forgotten could exist. Halfway through the book, Jamie's breathing slowed. A minute later, he was asleep. Emily gently shifted, letting him rest more comfortably against the pillow. She tucked the coat back around him, smoothing his hair with the same hands that once steadied tiny IVs. Thomas whispered, "Thank you." She looked up. For what? For making it look so easy. It's not, she said, but sometimes it feels worth trying again. He nodded slowly. Silence fell, but this time it wasn't hollow. It was restful. After a moment, Thomas spoke again, quieter this time. I forgot how peace looked like. Emily didn't respond with words. She just met his eyes. Beyond the window, snow swirled in steady sheets, thick and insistent. The lights of the terminal were distant, now diffused by the storm. Everything was white noise and window panes and the feeling of being held in place by something larger than your own will. Maybe they weren't meant to leave tonight. Maybe the storm hadn't trapped them. Maybe it had simply paused the world long enough for them to sit still. Together. A soft chime broke the moment. Weather update. All highway exits remain closed. Estimated reopening delayed by an additional 2 hours. Please remain indoors. Thomas sighed. Looks like we're here for the night. Emily looked toward Jamie, still curled beneath her coat origami plane resting on his chest like a paper promise. She smiled. Good, she said. Some nights are worth staying for. Morning arrived slowly, as if the storm still held the reins. Through the frosted hotel windows, the world beyond the glass glowed a soft, gray-blue, muted, gentle forgiving. The snow had thinned overnight, no longer a swirling threat, but a quiet blanket draped over the runways and roads. Inside the small hotel lounge, a different kind of stillness lingered. The kind that only comes after shared vulnerability when no one needs to explain why they're still there. Emily sat at a table near the window, cradling a simple paper cup of black coffee. The steam curled toward her face like a whisper. Across from her, Jamie hunched over his sketchbook, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. He was coloring, not just any drawing, the plane with the broken wing. Only now the wing wasn't broken. Jamie had carefully erased the jagged crack with a rubbery pink eraser and redrawn the outline smooth and whole. The band of tape he'd once drawn across the damage was gone. In its place, a new detail had appeared. The plane was in flight, its wings arched upward, catching imaginary wind. Above it, a bright yellow sun beamed in the top right corner. Emily smiled softly. That's beautiful, Jamie. He nodded, still focused. It's flying now. Thomas walked in at that moment holding a tray with 3 small breakfast boxes. Morning fuel, he said, setting them down. Granola yogurt and exactly 1 suspiciously squishy banana. Jamie grinned and immediately peeled open the banana with the ease of a seasoned traveler. Thomas poured himself a cup of coffee, then sat beside Emily. For a moment, they ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds being the soft scrape of plastic cutlery and the occasional slurp of yogurt. Then Emily spoke. Can I ask you something? Thomas glanced over. Of course. Why haven't you gone back to flying? He didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked toward Jamie, who was now humming to himself, coloring the tail of the plane in a rainbow gradient. Then, quietly, Thomas said, The last time I believed in flight, it took her away. The words didn't need explanation. Emily let the moment settle before she replied. "Maybe the sky didn't take her," she said gently. "Maybe grief just took your eyes off it." Thomas looked at her. Really looked. For the first time, something shifted behind his expression, like the click of a lock turning or the first thaw of ice against glass. His lips parted. And then, slowly, almost cautiously, he smiled. Not polite, not forced, not for show. A real smile. It wasn't big, it wasn't perfect, but it was his. Emily's breath caught for a second. She returned the smile. "That's your first real one," she teased. Was it that obvious only to someone who hasn't smiled like that in a while either? Thomas leaned back slightly, his hand brushing the rim of his cup. "I've been helping with a new project," he said. "It's the only reason I came back to Aeronova." Emily raised an eyebrow. "It's called Phoenix 1, he continued. "It's an R&D aircraft for humanitarian aid, short runway landings, medical relief deployment, small crew, big mission." Jamie perked up. "Is that the plane I saw last summer? The one with the weird curved wings?" Thomas chuckled. "That's the prototype, version 4.0. Emily tilted her head. "And you're in charge." Not of everything he said. "But I was asked to lead the humanitarian module team again. Just came back on a 3-month rotation. Figured I'd build it right then. Walk away. You were planning to leave again." He didn't answer right away. "I wasn't planning on meeting you," he admitted, "or watching you fold paper airplanes at midnight, or hearing Jamie laugh while you read about a fox in a balloon." Emily looked down at her cup. Her fingers curled tighter around it. He continued, voice softer now. "We have a visitor program. Internal team previews before launch. I was going to cancel this week's, but maybe you and Jamie would like to see it." Jamie's eyes widened. "Can we really?" Thomas smiled at him. "If your dad says yes." The boy giggled. Emily glanced at Thomas, her expression unreadable. "You sure you want a pediatrician snooping around your hangar? I'm counting on it," he said. "Sometimes we need people who aren't buried in blueprints." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll come," she said. "As a visitor." The phrasing wasn't lost on him. A visitor. Not someone claiming space, not someone demanding to belong. Just someone choosing for now to step in and see. It was enough. For now. The rest of the morning passed in softened time. Jamie made 2 more drawings, one of a plane dropping parachutes filled with food over a mountain village and another of a fox flying a biplane. Emily folded 2 more origami planes, and Thomas finally confessed he didn't know how to fold a paper crane. She promised to teach him next time. By noon, the roads remained closed, but the snow had lessened to a drizzle. They didn't rush to leave. Sometimes, after too many seasons of grief, you don't run when things feel calm. You stay, you sit, you breathe. And when someone offers to show you the sky again, you say yes. The hangar smelled like cold metal and engine grease. It was the kind of scent that clung to concrete floors and lived in the folds of well-worn uniforms. As they stepped inside, the air shifted crisp, clinical buzzing faintly with electricity and ambition. "Eyes forward," Thomas said with a smile, handing Emily and Jamie each a visitor badge. "And don't touch anything glowing." Jamie giggled, adjusting the oversized safety goggles on his face. They slipped a little, but he didn't seem to mind. His bright yellow reflective vest nearly swallowed his frame, and the noise-canceling earmuffs looked like they belonged on a pilot twice his size. Emily fastened her own vest and signed the waiver sheet at the front desk. It was standard protocol clearance for visitors in a live R&D environment. She respected the formality. Rules meant safety. Boundaries meant someone had thought things through. "I'm impressed," she said, adjusting her goggles. "You run a tight ship." Thomas clipped his badge onto his collar. "The tighter it is, the more room there is for innovation inside." They walked deeper into the hangar, the space widening around them. It wasn't just a warehouse, it was a cathedral of purpose. The ceiling arched like the hull of a ship turned upside down. Industrial lights buzzed above, casting a cool blue hue on everything. Massive diagrams and test charts lined the far wall, but it was the aircraft in the center that stole every breath. Phoenix 1, sleek, compact. Not built to impress, but to deliver. Short runway takeoff and landing. Modular storage for emergency medical supplies. A rear hatch designed for parachute deployment. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense, but it looked like it belonged to the future. A group of engineers, most of them young, wide-eyed, and grease-stained, circled around the aircraft's portside wing. One of them spotted Thomas and immediately straightened. Coach A chorus followed. "Morning, Coach. You brought civilians. She's got the visitor vest. It's legit." Thomas raised both hands. "Keep your jokes under OSHA compliance, please." Emily chuckled. "So, Coach." He scratched the back of his neck. "They're a good crew. Just need steering sometimes, and someone to remind them that the goal isn't perfect, it's possible and safe." Jamie stood frozen near the wingtip, eyes wide. "This is the one," he whispered. "From my sketch." Thomas smiled. "Your sketch gave it better wings, though." They continued the tour, stopping at the aft loading bay where compartments could be reconfigured depending on the mission vaccine's food, temporary stretchers. "It's not FAA certified yet," Thomas explained. "We're still testing redundancy protocols, but the hope is to get it into limited humanitarian use by next year." Emily ran her fingers just above the surface of the hatch. "So, it's close." "Closer than I ever thought it would be," he said almost to himself. Jamie stood nearby, sketchbook open again. He was tracing lines, matching them to the real plane, his way of anchoring wonder in something tangible. And then clatter. Snap. A small prototype model no bigger than a toy glider had fallen off the table beside them. One of the interns knocked it with an elbow. The tiny model hit the floor, its wings snapping off with a crack. Jamie gasped. The room didn't go silent, but his world did. He stared at the broken wing, his breathing shallow. His fingers twitched. His sketchbook slipped to the ground, forgotten. Emily saw it immediately. The freeze, the tremble, the onset of panic like a wave building in a child's chest too fast for them to name. She dropped to her knees. Not rushing, not loud, just there. Eye level, steady, present. "Jamie," she said gently, "look at me." He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the broken wing. "It's okay," she whispered, moving into his line of sight. "Remember what you taught me about wings." His lip trembled. "You said they can be fixed." Still no response. "Let's breathe," she said. "You and me. 4 in." She raised her fingers. "Inhale. 4 out. Exhale. Can you name 5 things you see?" He blinked. "The floor," he whispered. "Good. The plane. Great. My vest. Your goggles. And the paper airplane in my bag." She smiled. "Perfect." Another breath. Deeper this time. His fingers curled around hers. The room continued on. Engineers chattered tools, word, but in that moment a small, quiet corner of healing formed. Thomas watched it unfold from a few steps back. He didn't interrupt. Didn't move. Because what he saw stopped him cold. This was what healing looked like. This was what family could feel like. Not just shared blood, but shared presence. Jamie leaned into Emily's chest as she gently pulled him in one arm, wrapped around his back, the other steady on his shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured. "Wings break, but they're built to fly again." Thomas felt a sting behind his eyes. He blinked it away. Almost. Around them, the young engineers had gone quiet. They weren't watching Phoenix 1. They were watching something more human, more fragile, more whole. One of them whispered, "Coach, you okay?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I am." And he meant it. Because in that echoing hangar where dreams were measured in thrust ratios and torque limits, something softer had taken root. Hope, held together by paper wings, crayon lines, and the quiet strength of someone who remembered how to kneel beside a child instead of towering over him. The storm had grounded them. But maybe they were meant to see how strong wings become when they've been mended. The sun had fully broken through by the time they reached the parking garage. It cast long golden beams through the slats in the concrete wall, striping the pavement in warm light. The snow had softened into slush along the curbs, and a few puddles mirrored the sky overhead clear for the first time in 2 days. Thomas walked slightly ahead, unlocking his car. The sound of the beep echoed softly. Behind him, Emily and Jamie lingered a few steps back, the kind of slow shuffle that suggested none of them really wanted this moment to end. Jamie clutched his sketchbook to his chest. Then, as they reached the side of the car, he turned to Emily. His eyes were wide, but sure. "I want you to have this," he said, holding the sketchbook out to her with both hands. Emily blinked. "Your sketchbook." Jamie nodded. "So you don't forget us when you leave." Emily crouched down to his level, touched. "Jamie, I could never forget you." "I know," he said, smiling, "but just in case." She took it, holding the thick cover gently like it was something far more fragile than paper and crayon. It was warm from his hands, the corners bent, smudged with fingerprints and smears of marker. A record of a boy's mind, his fears, his skies, his wings. She hugged him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, sweetheart." Jamie grinned and clambered into the back seat of the car, already yawning as he buckled himself in. Emily stepped aside as Thomas opened the driver's door. For a moment, they both stood there, neither reaching to say goodbye yet. "You sure you're okay getting home from here?" he asked, squinting against the morning light. "I'll call a ride from the terminal," she said. "Roads should be open again now." Thomas nodded, but didn't move. "I'm glad you came," he added. Emily looked down at the sketchbook in her hands. "Me too." Then without another word, he slipped into the driver's seat and started the car. Emily stepped back, hugging the sketchbook close as the car pulled out and turned slowly down the ramp, disappearing into the flow of reawakened airport traffic. She walked toward her rental car and settled into the driver's seat. For a long while, she didn't start the engine. The silence was different here. Not clinical like the hotel, not alive like the hangar, just still. She opened the sketchbook. Jamie's drawings filled every page, planes in pieces, planes flying again. Some with notes scribbled in the corners, emergency wings, drop kits, wind boost. Others had faces drawn into the windows, little stick figure pilots waving proudly. She flipped towards the back, and then stopped. Tucked between the last 2 pages was something else. A small black and white photo. Not a full sheet, just the corner of one photocopied and neatly trimmed, the edges worn. It showed a woman's handwriting, slanted and clear. The ink was slightly faded, but still legible. "If one day he stops looking up, please help him remember the sky." Emily's breath caught. It wasn't prophetic. It wasn't dramatic. Just a mother's wish passed along quietly like a thread through a buttonhole. And then she remembered. The first night in the cafe. The note Jamie had handed her. Crayon letters on a folded napkin. "He's sorry he's late. Please don't leave yet." She'd thought it was simple. Thought it was just a last-minute message from Thomas. But now she could see it clearly. Jamie had written that note. He'd chosen the words. He'd copied them not from a phone or a conversation, but from this. From his mother's letter. "Please don't leave yet." Emily's fingers trembled as she pressed the sketchbook gently to her chest. Tears slid down her cheeks, not sharp and bitter like the ones she cried for Owen. These were softer, heavier, but not cruel, because something inside her had cracked open in the best possible way. Owen's memory hadn't disappeared, but the weight of it shifted. In the quiet of the car, she whispered, "Maybe it wasn't about failing to stay. Maybe I just hadn't learned how to look up again." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. Outside, a plane thundered down the runway. She didn't flinch. Then her phone buzzed. A text. "Thomas Hale. Thank you for being gentle with him. And me." Emily stared at the message for a long time. No emoji, no filler, just a truth. She typed, then paused, erased, typed again, and finally replied, Thank you for letting me remember the sky." Then she placed the sketchbook on the passenger seat beside her like a companion, and turned the key. Exactly 1 month later, Emily Ross walked back into the airport atrium. The cafe where she'd first waited felt smaller now. Or maybe she'd just grown in the weeks since. Everything looked familiar. The golden lights, the soft clinking of cups, the stream of travelers, but today the air was charged with something else. Expectation. She wore her visitor badge again, clipped neatly to her jacket, and a scarf that Jamie had insisted she borrow blue, with little stitched wings on the corners. "I call it lucky," he'd said. Now across the glass, past the secured corridors and the humming checkpoints, the Aeronova hangar stood tall. Inside it, something more than metal and wires was preparing to take flight. Phoenix 1. Emily had been invited to the internal demo private closed door streamed to company leadership and a few humanitarian partners, but kept off the public radar. No media, no press, just the people who'd poured heart and sweat into the machine, and a few who carried hope on their sleeves. She reached the observation deck and spotted them immediately. Jamie stood on a bench near the railing, waving a small handmade sign with marker-scrawled letters, "Go Phoenix." Below, the words he'd drawn a plane with taped wings soaring through a sky full of stars. Thomas stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes locked on the aircraft through the thick hangar glass. He wore his engineer's jacket, pressed for once with his badge clipped straight and his expression unreadable. But Emily knew him better now. She saw it in the set of his jaw, the twitch in his hand. He was holding his breath, not out of fear, but out of reverence, like something sacred was about to happen. Emily stepped beside them. "Hey," she whispered. Jamie beamed and held up his sign higher. "You made it." "Wouldn't miss it," she said. Thomas turned, offering a quiet smile. "You okay out here?" "Better now," she answered. They turned back to the window as the pre-flight team moved around the aircraft. Emily watched as the engineers performed final checks, their movements methodical, confident. The hangar buzzed with energy, not chaotic, but focused. A voice came over the internal comms, winds steady at 12. Mild cross from the northwest. "Keep your angle tight on taxi." Thomas didn't flinch. Another month ago, Emily thought he would have stepped in. Micromanaged. Hovered. Today, he simply watched. Trusted. Pilot ready, the voice confirmed. Cleared for demo takeoff. Suddenly, a gust of wind rattled the corner flag on the airfield. A small one, but strong enough to make a junior tech flinch. "Crosswind uptick," another voice said. "Advising. Wait." A pause. The room behind the glass froze. Thomas exhaled through his nose, didn't move a muscle. Then a clear, calm voice came over comms. "Team, we'll hold course. We're stable. Ready to roll." Emily glanced at Thomas. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, but it was enough. Trust. The aircraft began its taxi. Jamie squeezed her hand. Then wheels lifted. Smooth. Clean. No shudder. The wings held true. Phoenix 1 rose into the sky like it had always belonged there. No fanfare. No grand music. Just the sound of breath caught in dozens of chests and then released. Inside the hangar, a ripple of applause spread. Engineers hugged, heads dropped in disbelief. Even the most seasoned techs cracked into spontaneous grins. Emily felt her lungs open wide, her shoulders loosen. She hadn't even realized she'd been holding her breath too. Thomas turned toward her. His voice was soft but steady. "Maybe I can look up again," he said, "if you're there when I do." Emily blinked at him. Not from surprise, but from something deeper. Like the words had been circling them for days and had just now found the courage to land. She didn't answer with more words. Instead, she reached for his hand. Fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd been waiting for the moment to meet halfway. Not forced. Not rehearsed. Just right. Jamie noticed instantly. "Hey," he giggled, stepping between them. "If there's hand-holding, I get a middle seat." He flung his arms around both of them, her waist, his dad's side, pulling them in all joy and limbs. They laughed. and something settled around them that didn't need defining. It wasn't just about the plane anymore. It wasn't even about what they had lost. It was about what had risen, what had survived, what was still becoming. In a hangar built for aircraft, a small family had taken flight too, and this time all three of them were looking up together. The atrium café looked just as it had a month ago, golden lighting, travelers shuffling by, the gentle clink of silverware against ceramic plates. But this time, the table wasn't set for one. Emily slid into the same seat she'd occupied the night everything began only now. Thomas sat across from her and Jamie was wedged comfortably in the middle, sipping a chocolate milk like it was a victory prize. Their table was cluttered with tray wrappers, sandwich halves, and one cinnamon roll that Jamie had insisted they share but secretly wanted all for himself. The atmosphere wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, warm, like arriving somewhere you didn't realize you'd been walking toward for years. Jamie tore off a piece of bread and popped it in his mouth. Then, with the perfect comedic timing of a 7-year-old who knew exactly what he was doing, he looked up and said, "Well, now you both showed up on time." Emily laughed, setting her coffee down. Barely. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me, I was early. You two were the ones who detoured for muffins." "Correction," Emily replied. "Someone needed a muffin emergency stop." "I was hungry," Jamie mumbled through a grin. They all laughed. It echoed lightly off the marble and glass, catching a few smiles from nearby tables. After a moment, Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. Simple. Brown. Tied with twine. She slid it across the table to Thomas. Something small. Nothing dramatic. Just a thank you. Thomas looked surprised. For what? For the hangar. For Phoenix 1. For Coco. For reminding me that flight doesn't always mean leaving. He untied the twine carefully and opened the lid. Inside was a keychain. 2 small silver wings etched with delicate lines connected by a tiny rivet at the center. On the back, engraved in clean script, "Still meant to arrive." Thomas blinked. His fingers closed around the gift like it was something breakable, something rare. "I don't know what to say," he said. "You don't have to," Emily replied. "You just have to keep it." He looked up, eyes searching hers. "I used to think fixing something meant making it new again. Starting over, erasing the breaks." Emily held his gaze, and now he smiled slowly. "Now I think it means making peace with the cracks, letting the repair be part of the story." She nodded, quiet for a moment, then added, "Cracks let the light in." Thomas's smile deepened. "You sound like someone who's done some healing." "Still doing it," she said, "but now I don't mind the process." Jamie leaned over to inspect the keychain. "It looks like the one from my drawing." "It does," Thomas agreed. "Maybe it's a sign." Of what, Jamie asked. Thomas reached over, ruffling his son's hair, that some flights don't need runways, just people willing to try again. They fell into silence then, but it wasn't the awkward kind. It was the kind that holds space, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. 1 cup of cocoa, 2 cups of coffee, and a quiet understanding stretching between them. The atrium hummed around them. Boarding calls came and went, but at their table time slowed down. Eventually, Emily stood to clear her tray. Thomas rose to help. As they gathered napkins and crumpled sandwich wrappers, he glanced at her with a slightly shy smile. "I was thinking." Oh," she teased. "That usually means pancakes." He laughed. "Actually, yes." Emily paused. Thomas continued a little softer now. "We make pancakes on Saturdays. Nothing fancy. Jamie adds too many chocolate chips, and I always burn the first one. But we do it anyway." He met her eyes. "I'd like you to come, if you want." The question wasn't loaded. It didn't carry weight or pressure, just an invitation. A step, not a leap. Emily smiled. "Saturday pancakes." He nodded. Optional whipped cream, but highly recommended. She looked down at Jamie now, humming quietly and scribbling airplanes on his napkin. Then she looked back up. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." They left the cafe with the same kind of warmth one feels leaving a favorite movie, full softened, changed. This time, no one was late. This time, everyone had shown up. 1 year later, the hangar doors stood wide open and the sky outside was a perfect watercolor blue. The banner above the entrance read, Phoenix 1 Pilot Humanitarian Launch Day. It wasn't a media circus. No cameras. No staged ribbon cuttings. Just a small crowd engineers, volunteers, and a few field partners watching a new kind of plane prepare to take flight into a world that desperately needed it. Emily Ross stood near the edge of the hangar clipboard and hand a lanyard around her neck that read, Medical Advisor Volunteer. Her jacket bore the same Aeronova patch Thomas used to wear. She didn't wear it for show. She wore it because she'd earned it. Across the floor, Jamie darted between gear crates waving a paper plane at a young flight medic. He was taller now, or maybe just more grounded in his joy. Careful near the main prop, Thomas called out from a distance, half chuckling. I promised your teacher I wouldn't let you get launched to Bolivia. Jamie gave a thumbs up, then veered back toward the observation bay. Emily watched him run a soft smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It still amazed her how much healing could happen in 1 year. Not all at once, but moment by moment. Somewhere overhead a soft flutter caught her attention. A yellow butterfly, fragile silent, had drifted in through the open bay doors, weaving past the tall scaffolding and landing gently on the edge of Phoenix 1's wing. Emily blinked. In a hangar full of steel and data, it looked impossibly delicate. Jamie spotted it first. Look, he whispered, pointing. It found the plane. Thomas stepped beside Emily. A stowaway, or maybe a sign, she murmured. Thomas smiled. Sometimes the sky sends a thank you. She looked at him. Or maybe she said softly, it waited for us. They stood like that for a moment, shoulder to shoulder, watching the butterfly rest in stillness, unbothered by the noise, the crew, the world rushing around it. Then Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and turned to her. Before launch, he said, There's something I've been meaning to give you. Emily glanced at him, a quiet question in her eyes. He pulled out a small silver key ring. 2 wings, slightly worn, familiar, the same pair she'd once given him. But this time they were holding something else. A key. Not ornamental, not symbolic. A real house key. He didn't make a speech, didn't drop to one knee. He just placed it in her hand with quiet certainty and said, Home, if you want it. The hangar noise dimmed in her ears. Everything softened, her breath, the air, the months of hesitation she didn't even realize she still carried. Tears gathered gently at the corners of her eyes, not from surprise, but from the relief of hearing exactly what she hadn't dared hope for. Not forever. Not promise me. Just home, if you want it. She nodded, slow, steady. I do. He smiled, eyes bright. Good. I was running out of reasons to make pancakes for 3. Behind them, Jamie threw his arms up in the air. Are you guys hugging or what? They laughed, full and free. And somewhere in the rafters, the yellow butterfly lifted off again, circling upward out into the sky. The launch checklist echoed over the speakers. Final clearance approved. Phoenix 1 is cleared for liftoff. Everyone gathered outside the hangar, eyes turned upward. The aircraft sat at the edge of the runway, engines humming like a heartbeat waiting to rise. Emily stood between Thomas and Jamie, one hand tucked into Thomas's, the other resting lightly on Jamie's shoulder. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. The wheels turned. The wings caught light. 2, 1. Phoenix 1 surged forward, and with grace it hadn't yet shown in all its testing months, it flew. Clean, true, whole. A wave of applause broke out, but Emily didn't clap right away. She just watched, eyes wide, heart wide open, as the machine soared into the sky. The sound of the engine wasn't loud this time. It was steady, like a drumbeat, like a promise kept. Thomas leaned in. It's flying, he whispered. Emily nodded, her voice soft and sure. So are we. The sunlight poured through the atrium windows, soft and golden, casting long shadows on the polished floor. It was the same cafe, the same table, even the same warm hum of announcements and coffee machines and quiet conversations. But everything felt different. This time there were 3 chairs filled. Emily sat on the left, her fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee, the steam curling toward her cheek. Thomas was across from her, one arm slung casually over the back of the chair, the other nursing a cup of his own. And Jamie, now a little taller, a little steadier, was wedged between them, sipping a hot cocoa with 2 extra marshmallows and scribbling something onto a napkin with a red pen. Outside the windows, a plane rolled across the tarmac in slow, confident motion. The storm was long gone. The sky clear and quiet. Emily looked across the table, the warmth from the sun mirroring the one that had settled deep in her chest. "So," she said, smiling, "are we calling this brunch or a delayed lunch from last winter?" Thomas chuckled. "Let's call it what it is, breakfast, lunch, and everything we missed in between." Jamie grinned and held up the napkin he'd been writing on. Look, in slightly messy but clearly intentional handwriting, it read, "Sometimes love is delayed, not denied." Emily blinked, her heart catching. Thomas leaned closer, reading the words slowly. He looked at Jamie, eyes warm. "That's pretty wise, kiddo." Jamie shrugged like it was no big deal, but his smile betrayed his pride. Emily reached across the table and gently touched the napkin. "You know," she said, "you're the reason any of this happened." Jamie tilted his head. "Because of the note. Because of your belief in timing," she replied. A doctor and an engineer walked into a cafe because a boy knew how to wait. Thomas shook his head, smiling gently. "No," he said, "because he believed in love that doesn't need perfect timing." Emily turned toward him. He wasn't being poetic. He wasn't trying to impress. He just meant it. And somehow that meant everything. They sat in easy silence, watching the light shift across the table. A nearby traveler laughed softly into her phone. Somewhere behind them, a barista shouted out a drink order. Life moved on, steady and uninterrupted. And for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like she was outside of it, observing. She was in it, present. A small family, forged by chance, strengthened by choice. A chime sounded overhead. Now boarding Flight 7117 to Seattle Gate C-14. All 3 of them instinctively looked up, their eyes drawn to the giant skylight above the atrium. Beyond the glass, a plane ascended into the blue, its wings cutting across the sky with precision and grace. Thomas reached over and placed his hand over Emily's. Jamie leaned into both of them. None of them said a word. They didn't have to. Maybe what we wait for isn't late. Maybe it's learning to look up again and finding the courage to stay when the storm says go. The camera would have pulled back then if this were a film. But it wasn't. It was just a moment. Real and grounded. At a table where no one sat alone anymore. As the sunlight hit the window just right, the reflection of a departing plane shimmered in their eyes. A soft glow. A quiet promise. A reminder that flight doesn't always mean departure. Sometimes it means arrival. And maybe that's what life is really about. Not perfect timing, but the courage to show up even when the sky feels heavy, even when it's late, because sometimes the things we're waiting for are just waiting for us to believe again. If you've ever found love or healing later than expected, if someone ever helped you look up again, we'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. You never know who might need to read it today. And let us know, where are you watching from, your city, your country, your corner of the world. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us all that kindness still matters. From our hearts to yours, thank you for spending this time with us. We're so glad you were here. Until next time, keep looking up.